Hi friends, today we're going to be talking about a unit build slash guide, okay? And yesterday I created a shell tier list basically talking about how I view shells. So when I recommend certain shells, you will understand why I recommend it. If you haven't watched it, I'm going to link it up here. Make sure you guys check it out. Right now I'm still streaming, and if you want to catch me on Abstract, make sure you catch me on Abstract. Link is in the description down below. But without further ado, let's talk about Tiamat. Okay, I got a lot of requests on Tiamat, and my chat's just full of people asking about Tiamat builds. And it's understandable because Tiamat is so oppressive in PvP. Alright? Now, let's look at Tiamat. Before we can even do anything, we have to look at what she does. Okay? So let's look at her skills. Let's actually look at her in the archives. Alright? Let's go to the archives. Let's look at her. Where is she? She is here. Alright? Now, as we can see, her S3 is basically a taunt. Alright? A two-hit taunt. And her entire shtick is about her losing HP to deal damage to your opponent based on how much HP she loses. Okay? That is her S3. Her S3 is basically just a taunt. Her S2 is a shield and a heal over time at the expense of her losing HP. Okay? The more HP she has, the thicker the shield is, the less HP, the lesser HP she has, the smaller the shield. That's how it works. Alright? And the S1 is just a single target attack that, takes some HP away from her to do damage. Alright? And why does she do that? It's because every time she loses HP or gains HP, she gets Bloodshed. Alright? And Bloodshed basically gets triggered over here. You can see gains 1 stack of Bloodshed for every 13% max HP lost or healed. And when she gets 8 stacks, she enters her ultimate form, which is her dragon form. Alright? Healing 10% of her max HP and immediately gaining a turn. Now, why is she so powerful? It's because what she does is she also damage shares. Alright? 25% of the damage taken by other allies is shared to her, helping her reach that threshold for bloodshed a lot quicker. And because of that, you are naturally more tanky as in your whole team as a whole. And when she transforms, she does a lot of damage. And so what happens when she transforms is she starts doing Purge Day, which is basically a 15% of her max HP to all enemies, and then additionally inflicting additional real damage equal to 13% of her current HP. Alright, and then recovering 20% of that damage dealt. So she can definitely do a lot of damage. Alright. PvE, not so much of a use case for her, but she's still very good to have in PvE because she helps you survive waves that you were not supposed to clear. In the Ember Track 42, before it was nerfed, what I used to use was Tiamat before I had Viper built, and that helped me survive the wave a lot better because of the damage share, because back then my Sierra constantly died too quickly, but adding Tiamat in there helped me. Alright? But if you have Viper, use Viper instead. It's a lot cheaper of an investment. But we're not talking about Viper here. Alright? We're talking about Tiamat. Now that we understand what she does, if you can look, her HP is very high. Alright? She has, decent speed, I want to say. Decent speed. And she naturally has already effect rest. So you know that you have to build her somewhat of a support DPS if that's what you want to build her. Alright? There is no classification that she is, play X way or Y way. And so because of that, it's easier for me to tell you how I view her. Okay? So if you look at how I built my Tiamat is currently on Swift Rush Bramble. Alright? My gear is not the best. I only just started farming Inferno. Now that the EWS is over, I can actually focus on my PvE units a little bit more. And so, as you can see, this is what I'm rocking on her at the moment. I'm focusing a lot on the HP portion because that's where most of her damage comes from. And also, if you have a lot of HP, that means you can soak more damage. Alright? Essentially, I'm building her as a support DPS that can also tank. Alright? And you can see that my right side is basically HP, crit, HP. Alright? 2 HP pieces and a crit. And why is the crit there? It's because I want to amplify the damage that I do from, my normal attacks. All right. It does not count for the true damage. It's just when she attacks, she does a bit more because now I'm actually using the crit rate multipliers here. All right. And that's why I put one slot of crit. That's the first point. The second point, why am I running her on Swift Rush instead of, something like a Bloodbath? And that's because the way I want to use Tiamat is to use her as a sponge and a reverse cleave for the ref cleavers. All right. In order for me to, quickly die, I need to not be on Bloodbath because I am pairing her with Amber. All right. And there is an argument for you to use a Lighthouse, and that is definitely, a very good choice of shell if you are planning to play, just the tank route. But the way I want to use Tiamat is to use her as an answer towards cleavers, because if you die, Amber will proc, and what happens is the interaction between Amber and Tiamat is, no matter how you look at it, no matter what your HP is, as long as you are going to 0 and you're not going to 0 by Messiah, who ignores passive, you are naturally getting 6 stacks of bloodshed. Alright? And when you get 6 stacks of bloodshed, what Amber does is it removes all effects and then recovers 50% of your max HP before putting you into Ice State. And that 50% makes up the rest of your bloodsheds, transforming you into Dragon Form when you turn into Ice State. That instantly gives you the turn instead of getting pushed back or half your turn meter. And you can instantly press your S1 and get a second life. That's how I want to use her, because I want to soften up the ref cleavers before, the rest of my cleanup crew cleans up the ref abuser. Okay? That's how I want to play Tiamat. Now, there are also people who will play her on, Bloodbath. I think that Bramble is like her best 8-piece, no matter how you look at it, because a Tiamat who has transformed, who that actually counters, is actually devastating. One wrong proc can actually kill you. There are times when she's already on 7 stacks of bloodshed, and she S1s on a Bramble proc, transforms her into Dragon Form, and then she gets another turn, and then she presses S1 and AoE. That can be extremely, extremely detrimental. Alright? And so a lot of people will run her on Bramble, and I also think that Bramble is her mainstay 8-piece. Okay? For her specialized core, I don't have that yet, but I will assume anything along the lines of an, Colossal Guard would work, because Amber has that. If we go into the shell, right? Let's go into the archive and we look at the shell here and look at what Amber provides. You can see that Amber provides Colossal Guard and Swift Smite. Alright? So any one of these two will be her best 6-piece. But most of the time, I think that you're probably going to want Swift Smite, because that gives her more speed, right? If you can see what Swift Smite does here, it's 15% more speed and 20% more effect accuracy. And this effect accuracy can actually be pretty clutch, especially when you're using your S3 to taunt, when you don't want your opponent to do a certain skill and you want to taunt them. This actually helps. Colossal Guard is also not bad. This just makes you way more tanky, and if you're going down the Bloodbath route, I think Colossal Guard is probably more correct for you. Okay? That's what I think. And you can also see that Lighthouse is the other one that I recommend. And you can see that they have very identical, matrices on the shell. Alright? Now, why is Lighthouse good for her? Because when you play a Tiamat, typically speaking, you need to play a Tiamat with healers. A Tiamat without healers makes it very difficult for you to, fulfill the 8 stacks of bloodshed to get into ultimate form, right? Because your opponent just gonna nuke you down. And so you need the healers to help you go, give you more health, push your HP up and down 13%, and that's how you transform and you become really, really oppressive. What Lighthouse does for you is it takes away the need for a healer, and you use it in the terms of a shell. And what that does for you is When she takes anything more than 25%, if we look at what, it does here, let's look at the lighthouse. Triggers when the main body takes, damage greater than 25% of the max HP within a turn. You heal back 25% of your max HP, increases your turn meter by 25%. So that means you don't actually need to play a healer. You don't have to run her extremely fast. You are cheating turn meter, you are cheating healing, and you're cheating blood stacks, basically. And this has a very, very low cooldown. So this just makes her infinitely more tankier, helps you, cut and steal turns when you're not supposed to. And that is also a very, very good alternative, especially if you're going down the Bloodbath Bramble route. Alright? I went down the Ember route because I have a very specific use for my Tiamat, which is to answer cleave. Okay? Doesn't mean that the Bloodbath route cannot answer cleave, it's just that I prefer this route a lot more. Okay? So, that is how I would actually build Tiamat. With your prowesses, definitely I would, instead of focusing on your speed here, which is your S1, okay, I'm actually going for more HP first, all right, so that I can get, more tank into me, and which means more damage. And then after that, I'm going straight into her S1, all right, I'm maxing it out. Because at the end here, right, this is actually really important. It just means that she can trigger bloodshed a lot quicker. All right. So really, I would recommend you focus on your S3 first, just to get more HP. All right, and you also do a little bit more damage. All right, and recover a bit more, and then focus on S1. S2 can come much later down the line. All right, because it's all about what her shield provides for you. And right now, she is already more than sufficient, even without any tofus. Okay. Besides that, that is basically my guide for Tiamat. I think I rambled on too much for 12 minutes on one unit, but that is how I think about when I am building a character, what I want to use, how I want to use them, and then I will then think about what to put on them. All right? Hopefully you enjoyed this little guide series, and if you did, make sure you hit the like, comment, subscribe. Catch you guys in the next one.